Hello and welcome to another edition of Florida Sportsman Action Spotter Podcast. I'm Captain Rick Riles. Hey, we got a good time planned for you this afternoon, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a trip around the state and check out and find out what's happening with fishing. I got to know what's going on with the mullet run. I suspect our sail fishing is picking up. I know that our blue water fishing in Northeast Florida is very good for blackfin tuna, and we're going to check our way all the way down the East Coast. Then we're going to go to the Keys, check in with Alamirada, and work our way up the West Coast and out the Panhandle just to find out what's going on with the fishing. I also got a question for the guys. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was positive that global warming, what we called it back then, now climate change, was a hoax and just was being used politically. I'm afraid I'm not so sure anymore. I want to see if the guys have seen any change in their fishing. These guys are all lifelong fishermen that they've noticed as it seems the water has gotten higher and it seems our winters have gotten shorter and less dramatic. Let's start out with a quick trip to paradise. I got to get my billfish fix from one Craig Sutton in Nosara, Costa Rica. We're going to start tonight's podcast in my favorite billfish destination. If you gave me one more place to fish, one more day to fish, I'd be easy to find. I'd be in Nosara fishing aboard. Let's see, I think I would rather fish aboard the Wanderer for my last day. I don't know. We'll have to check out and see what's going on with Mr. Craig Sutton. How are you, Craigie?
Ricky, we are so good. We're so good down there. I mean, if we were any better, we'd be in prison.
Oh, no. What are you catching?
Lots of mahi. All big ones. I mean, now we did catch, in the month of November, we caught, I think, 3 under 20 pounds. But we caught one this weekend, looked like it was probably 10 to 12. But they caught 7 of them and had a marlin, too. So
I got
I don't
you.
know. That's not too bad day.
That's not a bad day. No, sir.
Not a bad
sir.
day. But it's been like that. It's been bookends like that almost every trip. It's a bunch of mahi, a few yellowfin, and and some sailfish mixed in, and then a marlin here or there.
I
mean, it's been so consistent. It makes me scratch my head sometimes because, it's you go 5 or 6 days of good strong bites, you're going to have one hiccup day, but we haven't had one.
We certainly do over here, don't we? When we hear locally in Northeast Florida, when we have 2 or 3 good days in a row, you can look for a day for it to crash.
Yep, exactly, like yesterday. But it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty slow. But yeah. I mean, it's this. I hope it continues on all year round. But now earlier in November, the first part of November, there was a lot of them that were inshore. The mahi I'm speaking of, and a few yellowfin too, and a sailfish or two. But now it seems like the inshore is transitioned, and while there's a few white tuna and cirros and a few small yellowfin, there doesn't seem to be the big numbers of the mahi that there were earlier. But that 10 to 12 to 15 miles out, it seems to be pretty doggone good.
That's good. That's good. Hey, real quick, over the last 10, 15, you've been down there 15 years now, haven't you?
20, about 21,
okay.
22. Yeah.
Have you noticed any change that you would put on global warming or climate change?
No, not a bit.
Now,
they had
that makes sense.
They acted some new rules about the longliners. They had to be 40 miles instead of 30 miles offshore, and we saw a big benefit the very next year, and still seeing, I think, benefits of it. But no, I don't.
Gotcha. Craigie, that sounds fantastic. Now, how are your bookings looking? Are you full for next month?
January? No, we still got. I mean, I think I just hung up from talking to a lady that's fish was before, and I think I'm gonna squeeze her in. But we've got a lot of bookings, but smaller groups right now. We've got room, and we had a guy cancel out of California for the first part of January because of his job. But no, we're still good. I mean, we don't have hardly any. I mean, we got a few dates that are totally blocked off, but not many. I mean, we can always use some more.
Good deal. Glad to hear it. Now, folks should go to fishingnosara.com or they should call you, right?
Call me 904-591-2161.
Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Captain.
Craig Sutton from Nosara Paradise Fishing. You know what that means? Time to hit Northeast Florida. Let's see what David Voorhees is up to. How's it going, David?
Hey, you know what? It's been good up until today.
Oh, no.
Yes. We really struggled today. And actually yesterday too, it wasn't quite as good. I could feel it sort of trending down. Now we got a bunch of dirty water came in, and I don't know where it came from, but I wish it would go away because I've really been enjoying the cleaner, clear water. But for some reason, we got a bunch of dirty water, and it's hard to figure it out. But talked to several captains today, and they were basically saying, thank God for the trout because the reds just were not biting. And that's sort of what we saw last couple of days. Plenty of trout. The trout are short. They're all pretty small, anywhere from 13, 14 inches with occasionally a 15-incher mixed in there every now and then. But haven't seen any of the big trout. Flounder fishing has been really good in the river. And actually up around the Blunt Island area, they've been doing really good on some really nice stud flounders. I mean, 7 to 8 pounders. And they've been catching those on the live finger mullet.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
But, it's just, it was, like I said, it's been really good. Today, I mean, we didn't see a single bird in sight today. There was no shorebirds working. And Ricky, I've always said, you know me, when it comes to watching the birds, man, the birds are good indicators as to what your bite is going to be like. And when you don't see the birds along the shoreline and the birds feeding, boy, you know you're going to struggle. And we never saw a single one today along the shoreline.
Isn't that strange? Now, how did they know, and how did the redfish know? You'd think if you got out early, it'd be noon before the birds figured out that there weren't any minnows around, wouldn't you?
Yep. Well, Rick, we fished at low incoming this morning, and yesterday we started at noon and fished at high outgoing all the way out to low tide. Now, we finally got on some good reds yesterday, but it wasn't until late around 4 or 5 o'clock when that tide had completely emptied out, and these fish were along the deep edges along the intercoastal.
I got you. Okay, well, it's all right. I'm sure that dirty water's not going to hang around forever.
I don't think so. Yeah. And I think we got a real good warming trend coming. Water temperature day was back up to 62. It had gone all the way down to 59. So the water's sort of warming. A warming trend which is what I like to see for catching those redfish.
All right. Speaking of warming trends, okay, David, you've fished out here a long time. Have you seen any changes that you would attribute to climate change in our water over the last 15, 20 years?
Absolutely. And more so, I would say in the last 5 years. Yeah. I've really seen something quite interesting, and I've been bringing it to a few people's attention. And a lot of people don't notice it, but I've always been one that, I've always said, study the shoreline, and that's going to give you you get a good read from the shoreline. Well, Ricky, I have been seeing these trees for the last 4 or 5 years growing, and lo and behold, they're mangrove trees, and they are north of the Atlantic Boulevard Bridge.
Right.
Now, normally you're saying, well, this is Florida. Golly, there's mangrove trees all over Florida. Not Northeast, not Jacksonville, buddy.
You're right.
Usually the first mangrove trees we see have been the first one. I used to point it out to people many, many years ago, and I'd say, you see that tree there? And this was just south of Pine Island. I would say that's the northernmost mangrove tree probably in the U.S. And you know what? I can't say that anymore. Now they are actually between the Wonderwood Bridge and the Atlantic Bridge. I have found at least 15 to 16 mangrove trees growing along the bank.
That's why you're one of my favorite people. I'd go 10 years without ever seeing them. But I think you're absolutely right, David. I also can attest to the fact that the water in our area, I am really convinced, is getting higher. Our high tides now, I drove Heckscher Drive today, and there are 3 or 4 houses up at the west end of Heckscher Drive where it's really low that were literally just flooded out with that last northeaster we had that was so strong. And I always remember strong northeasters. I never remember it pushing water up as high as it is now. So the plan is changing. I suspect it always has, but it's interesting to keep up with it from a fishing point of view. David, as always, I appreciate it so much, and I sure hope we can check with you next week.
You know I'll be here, buddy. And, hey, maybe if it keeps warming, we'll be catching snook up here.
That's what I've always said. I'm not scared of global warming. I'll be dead before it floods, and I may live long enough to catch a snook off my dock. Thank you, David.
All right. Tight lines, Ricky.
You too, buddy. Captain David Borges from Northeast Florida. And merrily we roll along down the East Coast. Let's check in with East Central and Captain Jim Ross. Cap, how we doing?
Doing fantastic today, Rick. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Doing really, really well. Tell me about your fishing.
Well, we've got that warming trend that we had kind of talked about last week. It looks like this is the week.
Yep.
And the fish are responding pretty well. We've got, pretty good flats fishing bite right now. The trout been really strong. They've moved out of those deeper holes, and they've, in the Banana River in particular, they're holding in about that 3 foot or less zone. Anywhere where you find calorpa, we don't really have any grass, but we've got calorpa, which looks like grass, so it gives them some ground covering, and they're holding in it pretty strong. Not any really big fish. The biggest fish that we've had here in the last couple of days is only about 17.5 inches, but there's plenty of fish anywhere from 12 inches to 15 inches to play with. So it's a great time to get out and just do some scouting, do some practicing with some different types of lures. Take the kids fishing. Just a really good time to get out because it's a good, solid trout bite. Even though there's no giants, they're there. Now, the other thing that we have is the redfish and the snook. The snook have still been a little bit fussy, but I think as this week progresses, we're going to see that warming trend really kick those fish into gear. The redfish have been slow to start in the morning, eating only cut baits. By midday and afternoon, they're starting to chase the lures around. So I think it's just a situation where as everything gets warmer, the bite's going to get better and better.
Jim, I've always maintained that kids need action and kids need bites to keep them occupied. Trout fishing's an awfully good way to start out with them, isn't it?
Oh, it's a great way. And you don't have to have anything, you don't have to have any kind of special skills. As long as they have a paddle tail, I use a lot of the saltwater assassin sea shads, that 4-inch sea shad. As long as you have an 1/8-ounce jig head and a little 3.5, 4-inch paddle tail, cast that thing out there, pull it back, and, if there's a trout around, he's going to eat it.
Perfect. Hey, I got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. When you and I became friends, I think I had hair and yours was black. So that tells you, that tells you how long ago that was. All right. Have you seen changes in your fishery that you would attribute to global warming or climate change?
Oh, definitely.
Really?
Definitely. The snook in particular. The snook bite when I was a kid was not. It was very difficult to catch a snook, with the exception of down at Sebastian Inlet. That was sort of in the Central East region. That was the go-to place if you wanted to catch snook. But now, Canaveral has got a huge population. Ponce Inlet has got a huge, remarkably large population, especially the last 2 years of snook. And as long as we don't get any, of those super cold winters, those fish are going to continue to stay there. Now, as far as global warming is concerned, I don't know if that can be contributed to our lack of seagrass. I tend to go by the opinion that, we have basically done that to ourselves. But just habitat destruction that's brought on by us, not necessarily global warming. But the black drum fishery doesn't depend on any kind of seagrass. The redfish fishery, the trout fishery depends on some kind of seagrass. The black drum fishery doesn't. So our black drum fishery has gotten stronger. We've lost trout, we've lost redfish, we've gained snook, we've gained black drum. So I don't know if it's necessarily all of it can be contributed to some sort of a global warming scenario, but I can definitely tell you that the change in climate that we have has brought a proliferation of species that we did not used to have 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it has decreased some of the species that we did have a lot of in that time, in that particular time period.
Yep, I don't disagree with you at all. And of course, the reality of this argument is we don't know what it was like 50 years before that. So,
right. Well, I do, because my grandfather was here in 1936, catching trout as long as your leg.
Yeah.
And putting those little ones, less than 5 pounds, back in the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm afraid
Rick,
that's probably true.
If we could get back to the point where we were saying little trout were 5 pounds, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'll tell you when I think I'm going to believe in global warming. I have an oceanographer friend of mine who lives on Melbourne Beach, and I mean right on the beachfront. And he keeps touting about global warming But I tease him and I say, hey, I don't see a for sale sign in your front yard yet. So I'm not going to continue to believe in this, seas are going to rise until I see that for sale sign.
Well, yeah. And I understand that theory too. And the reality is we've always had climate change. We always have. Now, and one of my favorite quotes ever was from one of the guys that started the Weather Channel that I had the pleasure to meet and talk with. And he said, global warming is real and irrefutable. Now, if you're going to convince me that mankind caused it, you have to tell me what melted the first ice age. And he said, and do not ask the same guy that can't tell you whether or not it's going to rain on Tuesday what the planet's going to be like in 100 years, because we have no idea. He said global warming may end after we're all gone, and it may end next Tuesday at 3:00. I don't know when.
One thing that I can't say about this particular year, though, Rick, is at least in my region, we are going back to what we would consider to be a more normal weather pattern.
Yeah.
And by more normal, cooler, in fact, even it's kind of chilly some mornings here, starting in October and then through November. Now, we've got this little warming spell that we usually get at the first part of December, but so far, if you look at the weather pattern for the last 2.5, 3 months, this is a more normal type of weather pattern from when we were growing up as kids and having to wear a jacket some Halloweens because it was chilly. And then these kids that are only 12 or 15 years old, they can't ever remember having to wear anything but shorts and flip-flops, all the way until Christmas. So It's kind of interesting that this year we do have some cooler temperatures, and I'm really excited to see what happens come mid-January, because that's when we typically get our coldest weather. And that time of the year is also when we catch the most fish on a trip. Those are the trips where you can get 80, 100, 150 fish in a day's trip, because all of the fish that are scattered about when the water is warm are all in the deeper holes, and they're very, very easy to find. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
I don't think there's any fish around. I don't know any fish around that don't congregate tighter when the water gets cold. It's an interesting theory, but redfish, you think about them, you think about trout dropping into deep holes, you think about all kinds of fish. They seem to congregate the colder the weather gets. Thank you, Jimmy. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you giving me a call and look forward to talking with you next week.
You got it, Captain Jim Ross from East Central with a good report. Let's move on down to my favorite little fishing village and find out what's going on in Stuart, Florida. John, how are you?
Good. Glad to be here, Rick.
Glad to hear from you. Talk to me about fishing offshore Stuart.
The offshore fishing in Stuart's been pretty good this week. We've got a couple sailfish tournaments that have been going on. I've been seeing as many as 9 or 10 sailfish being caught per boat per day. Yeah, we're getting a lot of mahi mixed in, some real nice blackfin tunas still, an occasional cobia here and there, but it seems like we got some pretty good sail fishing going on right now. Most of that action is going to be 90 to 160 foot, which we kind of expect this time of year. But, if you're trolling around in that area and it just looks like a dead zone, you may need to pick up and run north or south, as much as 20 or 30 miles. Could be as little as 2 or 3 miles. But sometimes, if you're beating a dead horse and there's nothing going on, and your gut's telling you to move, maybe it's a good option during these winter months, to pick up and run a few extra miles until you see a stray sailfish jumping out of the water. A lot of times, if you see that one loner fish jumping, he can signal that there's a whole school of 50 or 60 other fish with him, and sometimes that's all it takes to make your day go from zero to hero.
John, I won a tournament several years ago in the last hour off of Fort Pierce on a jumping fish 200 yards ahead of my boat. I took up, I ran 200 yards, I put over and did a 4-banger immediately upon putting over. I mean, each bait was eaten as it was being put out. So you're exactly right. Free jumping sailfish may be the clue to a whole school of them. We've seen that more than once. Anything going on down there inshore?
Yeah, the inshore fishing has been pretty good as well. We're still catching plenty of snook. We're not getting real big ones, but we're catching a lot of juveniles. That's keeping people happy. You got to the 15th to keep a keeper snook, and the season's going to be closed. Flounder season's open again. I see a lot of guys are catching keeper flounders right now. That's fishing closer to the bottom. A bunch of black drum, sheep's head, Vincent Pompano around the inlet along the beaches, and as usual, we've got a couple million mackerel out along the beaches right now. You just got to look for the commercial fishermen. Get close enough to them to where you can catch the fish, but don't get so close to them that you can have a conversation, because typically it's not going to be a friendly one, because they're out there to make a living.
They don't want to tell you good morning, do they?
Yeah, for some reason when you show up with your coffee at 9 a.m., they're not there willingly greeting you. I don't get it, Rick. I really don't.
I don't know. They're downright inhospitable is what they are, John Earhart. Cap, we appreciate it as always. That's a great report. And please tell me we can check with you next week.
Yes, sir. Let's check in next week, and I'll tell you the sales are biting even better.
I can't wait. I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Yep. Take care.
Our thanks to John Earhart for a great Stewart report where the sailfish bite has heated up. We knew it would. It's December, for goodness sakes. Let's move on down to Miami and check in with the mayor of Miami Beach, one Alan Sherman. How are you, Cap?
Rick, I'm doing just fine. And yourself?
I'm doing outstanding. I want to hear about fishing in Miami.
Fishing in Miami is good. The weather's great. We're having the mildest December in history. It's just beautiful.
Not much wind. You're right.
Not much wind, comfortable temperatures. Can't ask for much more. So the snook fishing in the inlets has been really good. The ocean inlets have been producing some nice slot-sized fish, mostly during the night, but they're also catching them in the daytime. They're getting them on jumbo-sized live shrimp and live pilchards, fish near the bottom. A lot of the fish are coming off the pilings or the bumpers. Some of them are coming off the drop-off where, the shallow water meets the deeper part of the channel. So those fish are there, and they're biting really well. On the beaches, on the piers, at times, the Spanish mackerel and blue fishing has been really good. More so when the water has been dirty, and that's happening more so on the outgoing tide. Otherwise, the water's been really clear with the light winds we've had. Moving further offshore, 30 feet, 40 feet, there's been a lot of Spanish mackerel on the outside of the second reef. And those fish are going for live pilchards and flashy lures.
Hey, Alan.
That fishing's been really good, yeah.
Alan, when you mentioned flashy lures, our old standby up in Northeast Florida has been trolling a double-aught Clark spoon, pretty long leader to a trolling weight. Is that your go-to down there, or what's your artificial of choice for Spanish mackerel?
Well, I'm not huge on trolling, so I'm usually going to anchor somewhere where I think the fish are going to be. But, the trolling is good when you're trying to locate. And once you do find them, then you can stop the boat and start casting those flashy lures. So if I had to troll to find the fish, often I'm using a hard plastic lipped plug. And if I don't think that bait is getting deep enough, I'll put a 1 ounce sinker in front of it, on a long leader, and that works really well for me. But I prefer to cast for those fish. So once we hook up, then I'll start throwing the lures. And they can be any kind of a flashy lure you have in your tackle box. Put a piece of wire on it to keep the fish from biting through the leaders, or, you're going to go through your tackle box and you're going to use lures you never used before, and they'll be gone by the end of the day.
I understand. All right. You hearing much from offshore?
So further out, there's been a consistent kingfish bite, and these fish have been anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds. Most of them in the 7 to 8 pound range, but there's been some on either side of that. And the numbers have been good. They're getting them just outside the reef, 80 feet out to, I'd say, about 140 feet of water. And then if you move out a little further, the 200, your chances of picking up some blackfin tuna, a couple of mahi-mahi, which have thinned out a little bit. And then we're seeing some sailfish around. Not a ton of them yet, but more than we've seen recently. A lot of bonitas mixed in with these fish, live ballyhoo, pilchards, spread-fin herring, fish a kite if you're looking for the sailfish. You also get the king bites and the tuna bites. But if you don't have those, get some fresh ballyhoo, a box of those Spanish sardines, and put 350 hooks together, and then hook that bait on there so it's nice and straight, and you can drift that with a 1 ounce sinker, or you can attach the baits to a 1 ounce jig, a red and white jig, with a couple extra hooks, and that works really good on all of those fish.
Alan,
so that fishing's been good.
Alan, it's been an awfully good year for blackfin tuna, hasn't it?
It really has. A lot of small ones, but that's what you expect this time of the year. The bigger fish, obviously, in our area, in Miami, they show up in April and May. But there's been a lot of fish, the football size, anywhere from a few pounds up to about 10 or 12 pounds. Sometimes I wonder if there should be a stricter size limit or a size limit on them. And at the moment, I don't think there is. So it's not a fish I target a lot because I'm an inshore guy. But I don't think there is a size limit or a quantity limit.
Yeah, there is. There's a bag limit. Yeah, there's a bag limit on blackfins now, Alan. And if I'm not mistaken, it's 5 per person.
5 per person. Well, that's good because, sometimes you can get into a school of them and you can just, fill a cooler full. And they're really not, when they're like that, they're usually not that big. But yeah, that fishing's been decent. The sword fishing's been really good recently, during the daytime mostly, because these guys are not fishing them much at night anymore. They, once they found out that they could catch them, on the bottom in the daytime, it's an easier fishery than being out there all night, missing out on your sleep. But that fishery's been pretty good. I fished today for a 4-hour charter. We had all the mutton snappers you could care to catch. None of them legal, up to about 18, 19 inches. We had a nice bunch of mangrove snappers that we kept up to about 14 inches. And then we had a bunch of bluefish and jack crevalles. A few of those jack crevalles right around 8, 9 pounds. And that was on a stormy morning. We had some rain around here this morning, but it was really calm, and the fish bit like crazy. So fishing's good here in South Florida.
Good deal. Alan, I stand corrected, and I knew this. I don't know why it didn't occur to me. It's 10 per vessel or 2 per person, whichever's greater.
On the blackfins?
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
there is no size limit on them. All right, buddy. We appreciate it, Alan. I sure hope we can check with you next week.
Look forward to it, Rick.
You know what Yamaha Outboards love? The genuine formula and consistency of Yamalu marine engine oils. Outboards are subjected to punishing conditions like high loads, salt, and humidity, a mix that automotive oils can't handle. Yamalu full synthetic and marine performance formulas are certified to protect against friction and corrosion for reliable performance every time. Find Yamalu marine oils at your nearest Yamaha Outboard dealer. Locate them at YamahaOutboards.com/dealers. Yamaha. Reliability starts here.
Hey, Raj, being consistent is the mark of a quality product. If you've been Florida's #1 chum for over 10 years, there's got to be a reason.
For 10 years, Tournament Master Chum has lived up to its name. That's why more tournament pros insist on Tournament Master than any other chum. It's the only chum with menhaden milk mixed right in. That means it gets the scent out faster and deeper than any other brand of chum. It comes in a grind size for every species from kingfish to catching bait. Your fishing time is way too precious to use second-rate chum. Bring the action to you by insisting on Tournament Master Chum. It's worth every penny.
When you're ready for the finest in custom-made flat spay or inshore-offshore hybrids, you are ready to meet the Young family in Inglis, Florida. For over 21 years, the Young family has built custom boats one at a time for every type of fishing. Nothing can sneak up on a flat quite like the Gulf Shore flats boats, and I've never fished a better hybrid than the Young 24s and 27s. Rob Young is a naval architect who takes tremendous pride in each and every build for each and every customer that wants their boat custom built exactly the way they want it. Is it time for you to move up? Are you ready to own the finest boat built? Then you need to visit the Young Boat facility in Inglis, Florida, or check them out online at youngboats.com. Our thanks to Alan Sherman for bringing us the news from Miami, where fishing's been pretty darn good for him. Now let's move on down to, I'm going to go ahead and declare it the best place in Florida to fish. That would be Alamorada, and that's where Captain Brandon Storn's waiting for us. Bean, how are you?
I'm great, Rick. It's good to hear from you.
This is always good to hear from you, brother. Tell me about your fishing.
Yeah, we had a full day today. We start off the morning just getting some light tackle action fun going and catching some Spanish mackerels. We had a good success at that. Then we cruised along some buoy lines, caught some triple tails. On the way to drift around the bank and just throw some artificial lures. We caught some sea trout, some red drum, some ladyfish and jacks were mixed in, but it was just good, some good artificial light tackle fun.
I got you. Now, the triple tail, were they legal?
You know what? Every single one of them today was like between 16 and 17 inches,
Brandon?
Which is great because a couple years ago, those would have been keepers. Those triple tail, if anyone else caught them, would have been dead. So it's great to see all those 16 and 17 inches around. I love that FWC made the legal limit 18 inches now.
Brandon, I'm telling you, I don't care what the species is. If you talk to red fishermen, they're going to say, oh, we can catch all the 17-inch reds we want. We just can't find it legal. If you talk to trout fishermen, all the trout are 14 inches. They don't make it. And that ought to teach us, Brandon, that the limits do their job. The reason why we don't catch as many legal fish is because when we catch a legal fish, it ends up in the cooler. Am I right?
You're absolutely correct. And I tell you what, and it trickles down to during the summertime when we see those big spawning triple tails. We see the last 2 years, we see a larger number of them. Mm-hmm. And it all trickles down. And I am a big fan.
Means the plan's working. What are you seeing offshore? What's going on out there?
So we're definitely getting a little bit more sailfish moving down. We've been having pretty good grouper and mutton bite on the reef and even on a shallow patch reef. A couple wahoo were caught today out there. The swordfish bite has actually been red hot.
Huh.
Nick Stanzik and Barney had a couple days where they caught 5 swordfish a day.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think Captain Mike Varney caught I think it was like 32 swordfish in 5 trips.
Wow!
Which is unbelievable.
That's some good sword fishing. And here
Couple
again,
double headers.
Here again, part of that is conservation. There's no doubt. Since we took the long lines out, we've got more swordfish.
Yep, and a lot of them were tagged and released fish.
Uh-huh.
They did get a couple good ones though. They did get a couple 100, 130 pounders, 150 pounders, but lots of tagged and released swordfish for the Billfish Foundation.
That's fantastic, and that's great news. Bean, that's a super report. Now, you seeing many mahis? Cap Mallon said they'd slowed down some up in Miami.
Yeah, they slowed down here too. You occasionally, find a stray on the edge of the reef or, on a wreck. But yeah, it's definitely not like, it's funny. Once we were from November to December, it was like a line through the sand. Not really seeing a lot of mahis out there, but it was a pretty good October, November for mahis, ironically, down here on the off the edge of the reef.
Yep. Well, I hope the swordfish bite keeps up for you, Cap, and please tell me we can check with you next week.
Always.
All right. Thank you, Bean. Take care. Our thanks to Captain Bean Storin from down in Islamorada. Hey, Steve, one of the captains, 32 swordfish in 5 days. Is that any good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Wow.
I think that's something to write home about for sure. That's amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that is crazy. I don't remember. It's funny you say that. I don't remember a 5-day stretch where I had 32 sailfish, much less broadbill swords.
Yeah, they got that dialed in down there.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Something else.
Tell me about your fishing.
We're doing good. It's that time. We got early December. We've had very mild weather. Lows in the 60s at nights. Upper 70-degree weather. I mean, it's just Chamber of Commerce weather, I call it. It's what everybody comes to Florida for. And water temps are great, upper 60s, low 70s if you get way in the back. So the backcountry is about as perfect as it gets right now. I mean, all the fish are in play. There's even on some bright sunny days, you can find some laid up tarpon on these low tides, which is a lot of fun. You're going to spook probably more of them than you want, but a couple of them will surprise you while you're fishing for redfish and snook. So that's a ball. Everything's really going. It's the backcountry with the big three, redfish, trout, and snook are all doing very well. I think if we get a couple major cold fronts here, that's going to shut down the snook bite. But the forecast is looking great. All the way through the weekend. So it's supposed to be a high 86 down here on Friday. So I mean the snook should be just absolutely fired up. So backcountry is doing good. You just got to understand we're now in these wintertime tides, and people got to be a little extra cautious navigating through the 10,000 islands, especially south. Once you start getting by Chokoloskee and things of that avail, that is treacherous terrain if you're really not privy to how to navigate that stuff. So great time to hire a guide down there. There's plenty of them. There's a lot of good ones. Great way to learn the area. So that's kind of our backcountry deal. But the mild winds have really allowed us to get offshore and do some nearshore fishing as well. And we're not going off that far, and we're finding, cobia and permit still. And, with the warming trend we're having, I would like, coming off of a new moon, I'd like to think it's going to be pretty crazy here for the next week as far as fishing goes. And that offshore bite has been fantastic. We're not getting the big permit that we get in, like months of May and June, but there's numbers and there's fish in that 10 to 15 pound range, and the cobia are, we're getting some shorts, but there's a lot of keeper size fish in the nearshore wrecks.
Good
So
deal.
It's been good. It's really been good.
Yeah. Do you feel like on an annual basis, like this year compared to last year, or is cobia fishing getting better?
It is, and I don't, we're not having to run as far, and I'm hearing that kind of all the way through, kind of Boca Grande south. Guys are just not having to run nearly as far, to find them. And one thing that we're really seeing is as we're, kind of doing some bottom fishing on some of these wrecks and, even some, live bottom and some reefs, catching, whether it be sheep's head or snappers and things of that avail, some small grouper, we're catching cobia. I mean, we're catching cobia right off the bottom. And I've talked about that once, probably in the last 6 months with you, and I've just never really experienced that. And, it's cool.
Yeah.
You think you got a big grouper on, and the thing just takes off sideways, and you're like, okay, that's not a grouper, And I can't tell you how many of those we've caught doing that, and they're good ones. I mean, It's not like they're little guys just running around. So I think things are, this is the beauty of fishing, things evolve, and there's a great line in Jurassic Park where they say, nature finds a way.
But I got to tell you, I think the regulations have helped us, Steve. We're not keeping cobia like we used to. The size limit helps, the bag limit helps, and I want to see the state mirror the feds. Or I guess it'd be the feds mirror the state and go to one fish per person.
That's kind of where we're at. These nearshore wrecks and reefs are on our sides, a 9-mile mark, between state and federal waters. And, it gets a little goofy. We've got a couple fish in play right now like that, with, lane snapper being open in state waters, but closed in federal. And it's getting a little goofy and confusing. And, we got to start, that dividing line's got to get solved, I think, to some degree. They got to work together a little bit better to, kind of blend these bag limits, whatever they, come up with. But, it's getting really confusing for people. It's, I always try to educate folks that are at the fillet table, and, I don't ever want to come across as that guy, but I always, look at it as like a public service announcement type thing, just be careful, really know what you're doing before you put something in the box. And, because it could cost you, it really could.
And you will find out there are people that disagree with you too, by the way.
I've had plenty of those. That's for sure.
Cap, we appreciate it ever so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Oh, Rick, I can't wait. I really can't.
Thanks, Steve. Keep them biting. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Captain Steve Dolphin, 10,000 Islands. That means it's Southwest Florida and Greg Stamper time. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Rick. How have you been doing?
Been doing excellent, buddy. Been doing excellent. Anxious to hear from you. What's going on with the fishing?
All right. So this is fresh off the block. Today, the big old black drums, the big uglies, moved into my neighborhood. So we're going to start talking about those a lot more. These fish came into our passes. There was mud everywhere. I slowed down. We stopped. We threw a shrimp on a jig. We hooked up to 2 40-pounders very quickly. This is live off the boat. I just got on the boat, got off the boat about 20 minutes ago. I'm still driving home. So they are here.
Now, where do those fish come from? Do you know? Because we get them here in February and March.
Ray sends them to us after he's done with them. No, seriously, no. These fish are pretty normally here when the water cools off. But this year, we've had a lot of cold weather, so they're here a little bit early.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I agree. We had a cooler November, certainly, than we've had the last several years. There's no doubt. What's going on besides Big Ugly Drum?
Okay, so I can tell you one thing. I got to be honest. I'm very happy with the trout fishing now. We are definitely back to what we were at before 2018. There's lots of fish. They're everywhere. They're spread out, and we're catching some fish. They're at 23, 24 inches right now.
That's good fish. That's good fish, Greg.
Yeah, Rick. Absolutely. Now, the redfish bite, it's been consistent now for almost 3 weeks. Small redfish near our passes or right inside our bays. They're very silver. That means they're coming from offshore. If you get in the back, especially when tides are low, and you start sight fishing, if you have a boat that can get into, Rick, I'm going to say 10, 11, 12 inches or less, you're going to see these big fish, but they're very much pushed back in our back bays. The snooks have not been good inside, but if you're on our wrecks and our reefs right now, you can definitely catch some nice snooks. Yeah, I think they're just out there. There's a lot of bait, and who knows? Maybe they'll come in, or maybe they will stay out there. But all the big stuff seems to be on our wrecks and our reefs. They're within 10 miles.
That's interesting. They pulled out of the inshore waters and headed offshore. That's interesting. We don't, for whatever reason, we don't see that on the in Northeast Florida. The snook that we get are all, believe it or not, Greg, they will get in the brackish water. We won't even see them at the jetties. We won't see them in the real salty water. The snook we get here in Jacksonville are all in brackish water. in downtown or further south than that, away from the ocean. So that's interesting. I guess different areas, they inhabit different waters. That's a fantastic report, Greg. Anything else going on we need to know about?
Kingfish are definitely showing up. Those guys that are getting out there on the outside that are anywhere from, 20 miles out, no problem with kingfish. Amberjack fishing is very good, and snappers. The nearshore guys are still wrecking permit like it's crazy, and the cobia has not slowed down that much. So if you're out there, make sure you tell your people to have something like a throw rod, something you can pitch to a cobia who just shows up for no reason, but they're still catching off the bottom. So life's good here. We're going to continue to see this pattern, I think, for about another month.
Excellent. Love it. Thanks so much, Greg Stamper. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
Absolutely, Rick. Look forward to it. Tight lines.
Tight lines, buddy. That means it's time to head up to West Central, but before we check in with Ray Markham, let's get a word from Shimano. There's just one thing that all our podcasters have in common. We almost all rely on Shimano gear when the best day is on the line. Whether it's Jim Ross chasing a tarpon with a Saragossa spinner, Alan Sherman catching muttons on his bait runners, Shimano gear is everywhere there's a fish in Florida. You see, Shimano builds a reel for every fish that swims, and when it seems like the new year comes out, here come all these new models with names that take me 6 months to pronounce. But you know what? There's a couple of models that have stood the test of time and stand alone at the top of the brand even today. If I'm fishing an inshore spinner, be it fresh or salt, you can count on the fact I'm throwing a Shimano Stratic. That's just because it's been around the block, and it just never fails. And if there's a blue water boat looking for a sea monster, I can almost promise you there's Shimano Tiagras pulling the big fish baits. Why do the best blue water guys count on Tiagras year after year? For the same reason I always throw a Stratic when I need to hook a redfish for my granddaughter. Because when the best day is on the line, you can count on the time-tested Tiagra and Stratic from Shimano. That means it's West Central time and time to check in with Ray Markham. Our thanks to Greg Stamper for a great Southwest report. Now let's move on up to the West Central and talk to Ray Markham. Raymond, how are you?
I'm terrific. How you doing, Cap?
I'm doing okay. I want a fishing report.
All right. Tell you, guys fishing nearshore waters are doing really well this week.
Good.
To the south, just off the beaches, and 20 to 40 feet of water. There've been a lot of cobia caught. Guys that are just basically out there bottom dropping, trying to catch a few shallow water gags, and they're actually still catching some triple tail and a variety of other things out there. But the one thing that's real surprising is the number of covias that they're catching. Mm-hmm. Some of them are actually throwing out big poppers, artificial lures, and just chugging them. And it seems to be attracting fish to the boat. So, chucking out live bait after that, they got it made. I mean, they're pretty stupid fish. And one thing that the guys that are doing the best with are telling me, they're taking popping corks with as big a shrimp as they can find and suspending it under the cork and chucking it out there. And it's just an automatic. So don't ever think that those shrimp are just for the flats and trout and whatnot, because they absolutely love them out there.
Cobia will eat a shrimp now. But what you're telling me is fish may be in schools, but cobia are not the valedictorian. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they aren't the smartest bulb in the pack. Right, that's for doggone sure.
What have you seen besides cobia?
In those same areas that they're bottom dropping, and what's really the most interesting thing is that they're catching hogfish.
Good.
This is what they really were targeting with the shrimp. And once they started seeing the cobia around, they put a few of the jumbo shrimp on. They weren't using jumbo shrimp now for the hogfish, but they put a few jumbo shrimp on under the cork, and that's where they started catching all the cobia.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're doing that. They're catching some gags. It's still not like super good. The water has not dropped to the point where the bulk of the fish are moving in. But that's typical this time of year, and we should get them until some of the coldest weather we get. And of course, they close at the end of this month. So if somebody wants to get a keeper gag and try and get it early, they got till the end of the month to do it.
Gotcha.
Inshore, guys are still doing really well up north of Clearwater, anywhere from Palm Harbor, Ozona, all the way to Tarpon Springs with snook, with trout, with redfish, with pompano, and also triple tail.
All right, Ray,
Targeting the trip. Yes, sir.
Ray,
Go
will
ahead.
your redfish hit artificial lures in this colder water, or is it better to fish bait for them?
They absolutely will. I've never had, actually, they do it probably better than they do live bait. But the only live bait that I would even consider throwing would probably be shrimp. Okay. It seems to be the main forage for just about everything inshore when the water really does get cold. And it's not that way right now because we've had some warm strings days that are heating up the water. But the guys that are fishing shallow mud flats after about 10 o'clock in the morning when the water starts warming up, and if they've got a live shrimp, they free line a live shrimp out there or something like a D.O.A. shrimp, they can't miss.
You can't miss with the D.O.A. shrimp. That's
right.
That's an outstanding report, Ray. Thank you so much for it. Can we check in with you next week?
Well, sure you can.
You got it. Thank you, buddy. Talk to you next week. I'm Ray Markham.
Hi, man.
That means it's time to check in with the mayor of Homosassa, who I understand is so fogged in he can't find his way home. Are you there, William?
I'm here. I can barely see my phone to talk right now, but I'm telling you what, we are socked in on the Big Bend with some really nice warm weather. But with the warm weather and the cool Gulf temperatures, you can expect sea fog every day.
Yep. And maneuvering in it is dangerous.
It's dangerous. You know, if you got an offshore boat, you're grouper fishing, you got some leeway. Once you get out past marker number 2 out of Homosassa, you're in the wide open. If you got radar, you're probably pretty golden. But if you're inshore and you don't have a good track on a GPS, then you could get in some decent trouble.
Yeah, you can. Tell me how your fishing's been.
Well, fishing has been fantastic. The grouper bite has been very good out to anywhere starting at 10 out to about 20, 24 foot, somewhere in there, but still getting them close in on casting plugs. And the water clarity is beautiful. There's no floating grass. And like I said, this week, though, we're looking at conditions where the incoming tides are going to be very early morning and very late evening. So it's going to be better for your casting for your grouper probably around 1 or 2 in the afternoon with that incoming tide. Now, inshore, as long as there's not sea fog, the trout bite has just been off the chain. Our regulations have really been working well here. Most of the trout have been the 17, 18-inch range, and getting the 1 over 20 inches is not a problem, but I still suggest those bigger fish like that, release them.
Hey, let me ask you a question. You mentioned as long as it's not foggy. The fog doesn't affect the fishing, does it?
It does not. And you know what? It's funny because sometimes, there's a couple times that I really wish there was a breeze. And a lot of times is during the summer when it's hot and it's slick calm. But this time of year, it can get slick calm. And you want that breeze to move that sea fog either offshore or inshore or just away from you.
Yep.
So the breaks have been first thing in the morning. You can get out there on the inshore waters fishing. And like I said in my report this week, that you need to be around the creek mouths. Anywhere on the Big Bend, there's a creek mouth. And Google Earth is such a great tool for seeing the old river channels that run off in those shallow areas. And when that outgoing tide, those fish will fall into that little gut. And if you can get that drift just right and stay in that gut, you're pretty good. And you'll see those fish in it and can catch them. But then when that fog sets in, you better have that track and that little bit of deep water, because this coming week is just a double-edged sword. You got sea fog and major low tides, which can, equate to you better have enough Irish sausages to last you till that fog lifts so you can get home, or enough fish that's going to keep you going. So that's kind of our scenario up here on the Big Bend right now. So inshore,
definitely trout, glow D.O.A jerkbaits, looking for that rock grass. Don't think we're going to have real good tides for red fishing, but if you do find some of them back holes in the creeks, if you got an airboat and know where to run, you're going to have to rely on that GPS and those tracks to make it happen.
Gotcha. Be careful in the fog. William, we appreciate the report so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
I'll be here next week. And Rick, I got to let you know, I mean, I want to hear about Catfish Hunter taking a ride in the back of a truck.
Catfish Hunter needs to go to the processor, something fierce. But he's a night watchman's what he is. I tell you, he's no dumb. You don't get to be Catfish Hunter by being stupid.
No. None of those big bucks like that do.
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you, William. Talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week in downtown Homosassa.
You got it, buddy. Yeah, William Tony with a great report. Catfish Hunter, in case you're new to the show, is a very large 10-point deer that I've been stalking for a couple of years now up in North Georgia, and he'll stop by my camera a few times a season just to say hello, usually around midnight. That means it's Kevin Lanier time. Let's find out what's happening in the Northwest section. Our thanks to William Tony for telling us all about the fog in the Big Bend. Now let's move out to the Northwest section and check with Captain Kevin Lanier. Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Captain Rick, doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine, son. What you catching?
Captain Rick, we've had the two best days of fishing I believe we had all year as far as quality fish go this last weekend.
What?
Unbelievable.
Catching what?
Catching grouper and catching some of the biggest red snapper that we have ever put on our boat.
Have you got red snapper open again?
No, Captain Rick, it's closed. But when you're fishing with big baits for grouper, those big red snapper will steal them.
Yes, they will. I promise you. And they're starting to get so big now you can't fish a bait too big for them. How big are we talking?
I'm talking 4 to 5 red snapper between 25 and 30 pounds.
Woo! That's big fish.
Yes, sir.
And how about your grouper? How's that bite?
The grouper has been, it's stupid good. I mean,
really?
We went out and just absolutely, the other day we left the dock at 7 in the morning, ran 30 miles out. We're on our way back at 10:30 with a limited grouper for the boat.
That is good. That is
and
good.
We stopped and caught bait.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you had a fine day. You had man, that is fantastic. Are you seeing any cobia, Kevin?
No.
Okay.
Well, let me take that back. Some of the people near shore are seeing a few cobia swimming around with the reds, but nothing offshore at all.
They're south of you. Yeah, there's a good handful of them south of you, but apparently they haven't made it up that far. Well, that's an outstanding report. Are you hearing anything inshore?
Most of the inshore stuff has been redfish. I mean, the folks that are putting in their time are getting redfish. The typical whiting along the beach. Not many trout reported, but, there's black drum around. So they're doing pretty good inshore.
Are the best of the sheephead ahead of us or behind us?
Ahead of us.
Okay. So that'll be when?
Yep.
February?
It all depends. I mean, sometimes it's February, sometimes it's March. It's coming.
Gotcha. Excellent. Kevin, as always, we appreciate it ever so much. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
We'll be back next week with more grouper.
You're killing me. I'm wanting to drive over there. I'd love a limited grouper. All right, buddy. We appreciate it. We'll talk with you next week.
All right. Y'all have a great day.
Take care. That means it's going to be time to wrap up after we check in with Tyler Massey. But before we do that, let's hear from D.O.A. Golly, I love fall. And how many of us have been waiting for the magic of the mullet run? There are literally miles of mullet moving along just about every area of Florida coastline. What do you need to cash in on the tarpon, snook, reds, trout, and flounder that are feasting on the poor fingerlings? Well, that's the perfect mullet imitation. Well, for my money, you skip all the high-dollar made-in-China mullet imitators. For me and all the podcasters I've talked with, the perfect mullet imitation is made right here in Stuart, Florida. It's a D.O.A. bait buster. Mark Nichols, the owner and manufacturer of D.O.A., has spent years designing different bait busters to swim shallow, medium, or deep. What makes bait buster so special? I think it's the tail. If your bait buster is moving, his tail is flapping, and no predator can stand that tail wagging in his face. The D.O.A. bait buster, the perfect mullet run imitation. Now it's time to hit the Panhandle and check in with one Tyler Massey. Tyler, take us out. How are you?
Well, we're doing good, Rick. How about you guys?
Good. Tell me about your fishing. I know it's been a little chilly.
Yeah, it's definitely cooled down a little bit. We're definitely getting our wintertime pattern inshore. It's been the best option for most people. We have a little more wind this time of year, a little bit rougher offshore, not as much to catch. So, inshore fishing is a great option. Starting out with, redfish, fishing around the bridges in the bay. So the Pensacola Bay Bridge, 3 Mile Bridge, people call it. Any day and time of day, you have a chance to catch some nice redfish off that bridge. It's 3 miles worth of pilings.
Now,
a lot of
Scott, let me stop you for just a minute. When we're talking about a nice redfish, are we talking about slot fish or oversized fish?
Yeah, so it's going to be both. We do probably catch more over slot fish this time of year, but there are quite a few slot fish mixed in. They're going to be upper slot, 25 to 27 inches. A lot of fish in the 30-inch range, though. So, it can be a good bite. And, that's also a place you can catch at nighttime, too. So, any time of the day, any day of the week, any conditions, it's an option for sure.
That's great. But you say offshore has been pretty well shut down by the wind.
Yeah, it's been a little windy. We have some fronts moving in, and there's just not a whole lot to keep. Offshore, we catch vermilion snappers all winter. Gag grouper is open till the end of the month, and we have scamps to catch. Bait's been a little tough to catch the scamp, so it just makes it a little bit more difficult, and you got to work a little harder to put together a decent box of fish. But there are plenty of fish to catch. Catch and release wise, red snappers, amberjacks, all that kind of stuff are all biting on the big wrecks just right out front here.
Gotcha. That's an outstanding report. Tyler, we appreciate the heck out of it. Please tell me we can check with you next week.
We'll be here next week.
Okay. Thank you so much. And that takes us out of our tour around Florida tonight. God, we had some good reports, and we had some not-so-good reports. Captain David Voorhees said the redfish bite dropped off quite a bit. And I got to be honest with you, I heard that the blackfin tuna that have been biting so good for everybody in Northeast Florida kind of fell off over the weekend, too. I hope that slump sure doesn't last too long. Now, you get down to the East Central, and Jim Ross is loving the trout bite. He said they are catching some pretty good trout. There's no more grass, but they're holding around docks, holding around little channels. They're all bunched up, and there's a number of trout being caught. John Earhart is loving the sailfish season. I don't blame him a bit. Out of Stewart said a lot of boats coming in with 9 and 10 as the first of the tournament season gets rolling down in Stewart. Down in Miami, Alan Sherman, oh my gosh, write it down. He's been happy 3 weeks in a row. Said the mutton snapper bite is good. Sailfish are pretty good. Mahi may have dropped off a little bit, but overall his fishing is good. Captain Bean Storin out of Bud and Mary's, well, he never has a bad day. Today he was bragging on the Spanish mackerel and the triple tail, talking about how well the triple tail regulations are working out. He says he knows that because he's seeing so many 16 and 17-inch fish. That means those fish are getting thrown back and they can't get harvested till they're above 18 inches. That's a good thing. You move on over to the Southwest, which I think is probably our best area of the state. The guys are very happy with the cobia. The cobia bite has been really good. In fact, it's been good all the way up through West Central. Ray Markham says they're catching them on popping corks and live shrimp, which I thought was pretty incredible. Pull up into the Big Bend. William Toney wants to warn everybody about this sea fog and about the low water that's going to be around later this week. That's going to make it hard to navigate, so you may want to hold up until the sea fog burns off in the morning. Kevin Lanier was ecstatic, catching 5 red snapper between 25 and 30 pounds a day on his boat, and he said his limits of gag grouper have been silly easy. By the way, all the best of the sheepshead fishing in that Panhandle area lies ahead of us. So it was a pretty good week of fishing, particularly for December. We've had a warming trend. It's not going to last long, so watch it, because the next cold front looks to me like it lands on Northeast Florida somewhere before the 15th of the month. Hey, this week's Action Spotter was brought to you by Yamaha. Reliability starts here. By Shimano, bringing people and nature together. By Tournament Master Chum. It's the best chum on earth. By Nosara, Paradise Fishing, your dream vacation. If you love billfish, you'll love Nosara. D.O.A. Lures, the unfair advantage, and Young Boats. You want the finest in flat spay and offshore hybrids? You need to check out youngboats.com. Until next week, I'm Captain Rick Riles for Florida Sportsman Magazine, and I'll see you on the riff.